It was a cool autumn evening when Flight 237 was scheduled to depart from a modest airport into the inky darkness of night. Passengers shuffled through the terminal with a mixture of excitement and exhaustion, unaware that the journey that awaited them would shatter every notion of a routine trip. Among the travelers were Anna, a meticulous project manager with a penchant for details; Marcus, a reflective writer seeking solace from a recent heartbreak; and Elena, a bright-eyed college student who always pushed the boundaries of curiosity. None of them could have predicted that, as they boarded the aircraft, a slightly dated twin-engine jet with seats that seemed to whisper of past travel tragedies, fate was colliding with the supernatural. As the heavy metal steps led them into the narrow corridor of the jet, a subtle chill replaced the biting autumn wind outside. The cabin lights, though warm and inviting at first glance, seemed inadequately bright, as if struggling against an internal gloom. Passengers exchanged polite nods and murmurs, trying to brush off an inexplicable tension that clung to the interior. Even the flight attendants, clad in crisp uniforms and forced smiles, appeared distracted, their eyes darting nervously from one shadow to the next. With each measured step down the aisle, the creeping sense of dread intensified, until the entire cabin felt like the stage for a dark drama about to unfold. Shortly after takeoff, as the aircraft ascended into the velvety night sky, Anna noticed something odd on her tablet. The in-flight entertainment system glitched briefly, displaying a series of fragmented images. A faceless crowd, blurred faces, and a single distorted message reading, "Help us." Her heart pounded as she glanced around, only to find that others seemed oblivious. Marcus, who had been scribbling in his worn leather notebook, caught sight of a flicker of light near the cockpit, a brief, ghostly luminescence that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Meanwhile, Elena's restless eyes were drawn to the overhead bins, where a series of soft whispers began to echo, almost in tune with the humming engines, as if the aircraft itself were murmuring secrets born of sorrow and regret. Moments later, the plane jolted suddenly, veering into unexpected turbulence. The cabin lights flickered, and an unnatural shudder passed through the structure. For a brief, terrifying second, the familiar hum of the engines was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated by distant, echoing sounds, a cacophony of muffled voices that no one could locate. The experienced pilot's voice over the intercom was measured yet tremulous, as he reassured the passengers that all was well, though his words betrayed an undercurrent of unease. In that moment, every soul aboard understood that something was deeply amiss. As the flight continued, the oddities multiplied. A persistent pressure in the cabin, as if the very air were thick with spectral energy, made breathing laborious. The flight attendants began whispering to one another during their checks, their eyes narrowed in grim understanding. It wasn't long before an elderly attendant, Ms. Greenwood, whose smile masked decades of service, confided in Anna during a brief moment of solitude. "There are stories, old stories about this route. They say that, long ago, a catastrophic accident left many souls restless, condemning the path to eternal despair." Her words, laden with history and a warning of doom, sent shivers down Anna's spine. The mere mention of past tragedy set off a chain reaction of disquiet among those who overheard. Marcus's writer's mind raced as he pieced together the cryptic details from the murmurs. The flight had flown this route on countless nights, yet on this night, even the laws of physics and nature seemed suspended. A thick journal, hidden in the recesses of a seat pocket, fell open to reveal a century-old diary detailing a similar flight, a doomed journey where passengers had never awakened from uneasy dreams. The haunted words of past victims merged with the present, as if the air itself carried the memories of long-lost souls as desperate to communicate their anguish. Elena, ever perceptive, noticed a peculiar pattern in the way the cabin lights dimmed inexplicably at intervals, as though a presence beyond human control dictated the flow of time and emotion within the aircraft. As the night progressed, every small anomaly coalesced into a full-blown nightmare. The temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly, and visible breaths hung in the stale air. One by one, passengers reported inexplicable phenomena. A child in seat 7A cried out that he saw a shadow looming under his seat. Two businessmen in the back argued feverishly that they had heard footsteps pacing the aisle, despite the absence of any late-night crew members. Panic gradually seeped in, not as a loud, blaring alarm, but as a creeping awareness that they were no longer alone. Shadows danced across the crevices of the fuselage, taking on eerie, half-formed shapes that reflected a lost time and an anguish too profound for mortal explanation. In an effort to restore order, the captain attempted to contact air traffic control, only to receive garbled transmissions peppered with voices that did not belong to the modern world. The static on the radio morphed into a conversation from a bygone era, a recounting of desperate pleas from souls who had met untimely demises aboard similar flights. Each lost word twisted into a chorus of sorrow and bitter regrets, reinforcing the notion that the aircraft was a vessel for those condemned to remain on a perpetual journey between life and death. With pen trembling in his notebook, Marcus began to document the events as if they were inscribed by an unseen hand. His notes became frantic, detailing every minute observation, from the subtle changes in temperature and the heartbeat-like thud of the engines to the persistent, spectral whispers that seemed to speak of unfinished business and irrevocable betrayal. Unbeknownst to the terrified occupants, the plane had picked up an extra passenger, a presence not included in the official manifest. Somewhere between the roaring engines and the dim glow of emergency lights, a shadow moved silently through the narrow corridors. Neither man nor beast, this apparition drifted in silence, leaving behind a trail of freezing air. While gathering her scattered belongings, Elena caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of a darkened window. A gaunt face with eyes hollowed by eternal sorrow, silently pleading for redemption. In that fleeting moment, it seemed as though the boundaries between the living and the dead had dissolved, merging into an overwhelming tableau of haunted despair. The unseen passenger did not announce its presence with terror or violence. Instead, it acted with a deliberate, almost mournful intent, as if compelled by an ancient duty to bear witness to the suffering of those aboard. Strangely, some passengers found themselves inexplicably drawn to the edges of the cabin, as if led by a force they could neither see nor comprehend. They gathered near the windows not to admire the vast expanse of the starlit sky, but to catch a spectral glimpse of that forlorn figure. Even the seasoned crew, hardened by years of service, found themselves overcome by a sense of helplessness, forced to confront a reality where rational explanations gave way to myth and shadow. With every passing minute, the terror escalated to uncharted levels. A deep, resonant sound, like the tolling of a massive bell, vibrated through the fuselage, compelling the passengers to huddle together in an almost instinctive bid for safety. The aircraft's instruments flickered erratically as if battling an invisible force. Outside, a relentless storm battered the plane with icy gusts, while flashes of lightning illuminated the deep scars in the storm clouds, evoking images of ghosts in a turbulent danse macabre. Inside, an oppressive darkness began to suffuse the cabin, swallowing the light from the overhead panels, and leaving the space illuminated only by intermittent bursts of emergency red. In these moments of blackness, every heartbeat thudded like a death knell, a reminder that they were venturing further from the realm of the living. The captain, a man of steadfast resolve and years of flight experience, made a desperate announcement over the intercom. His voice, although striving for calm, trembled as he implored the passengers to remain seated and brace for what he called a temporary malfunction. Yet, even as his words echoed in the darkened cabin, a tremor of dread permeated his tone, a tacit admission that he, too, was grappling with forces beyond mortal control. As the aircraft continued on its inexorable spectral journey, the boundary between rational fear and supernatural dread blurred, leaving every soul aboard clinging to the fragile hope that daylight and a return to reality might still be possible. In a brief lull from the horror, Anna managed to retrieve a small leather-bound notebook from beneath her seat. Within its pages, she discovered historical accounts related to Flight 237, a flight number long associated with disaster decades ago. The entries, written in a trembling hand, recounted the names of souls lost in what was described as an accident in the skies, when the aircraft, then a marvel of modern aviation, suddenly faltered, never to reach its destination. The diary spoke of unexplained phenomena, ghostly apparitions, inexplicable power outages, and voices emanating from the craft long after its engines had gone silent. Every meticulously recorded passage echoed the unfolding events of that night, and in these macabre chronicles of the past, Anna saw the unmistakable fingerprints of fate, a cycle doomed to repeat with every fateful flight. Marcus, both intrigued and horrified by the diary's revelations, pieced together a timeline that pointed to a recurring curse, a pattern of spectral anomalies marking every ill-fated journey. According to the tattered pages, a mysterious entity, born of unresolved tragedy, appeared on selected flights as a harbinger of doom for the unwary. As he scrawled his own observations alongside the historical records, Marcus could not shake the notion that the story of Flight 237 was preordained. The plane seemed a vessel trapped in an eternal loop of sorrow and terror, cursed to replay its darkest moments whenever the clock struck midnight. In hushed whispers and trembling voices, passengers and crew alike began to confess that they, too, had heard voices, ghostly murmurs pleading for absolution and vengeance. These spectral dialogues, laden with regret and inevitable sorrow, connected the personal tragedies of past travelers with the horror unfolding in the present moment. Every whispered word and every cold draft brushing against a shoulder served as a chilling reminder that the past was never truly gone. It lingered, woven into the very fabric of the airplane. As events reached a fever pitch, the atmosphere aboard Flight 237 transformed from disquiet to outright terror. The cabin doors, normally impenetrable bastions of safety, seemed to warp and shift as though the structure itself were alive. One by one, passengers vanished inexplicably from their seats. A man seated in the middle of the cabin was seen stepping into a dark corridor that had not been there a moment before. His anguished screams soon faded into an all-consuming darkness, as if swallowed by an unseen abyss. A frantic flight attendant, in a desperate bid to control the panic, hurried along the aisle only to be confronted by a mirror image reflection in the polished metal, a figure that vanished as soon as she reached out to grasp it. Desperation fueled the resolve of Anna and Marcus, who decided to confront the terror head-on by venturing toward the cockpit. Though hesitant at first, their steps grew resolute, driven by a shared determination to uncover the truth hidden behind the spectral veil. The narrow, labyrinthine corridors of the aircraft stretched endlessly before them, lit only by the sporadic glow of emergency lights and echoing with the distant, measured thump of an unseen heartbeat. Meanwhile, Elena, left with a scattering of terrified passengers in the cabin, clung fiercely to hope. Though paralyzed by fear, she resolved to document every detail: the fleeting, ghostly faces reflected in the windows, the unnatural cold creeping along her skin, in the hope that someone, someday, might understand the depths of this unfolding nightmare. In the cockpit, the scene was no less disturbing. The pilot and co-pilot sat motionless, their eyes fixed on instruments that now displayed erratic readings. The controls drifted as if handled by unseen forces, and within that cramped space, the air was laden with the sorrow of voices that no longer belonged to the realm of the living. Flickering screens intercut with images reminiscent of past tragedies, and ghostly faces whispered warnings of a fate too terrible to imagine. In that claustrophobic enclosure, the boundaries between life and death crumbled, leaving the pilots to confront an ethereal presence that demanded a tribute of both hope and despair. The moment of reckoning came as the plane began its descent into a storm-lashed stretch of countryside. Outside, furious winds and stinging rain pounded the aircraft with relentless fury, while within, the very soul of the vessel seemed to awaken in defiance of the fading night. The spectral presence, now bold and all-encompassing, surged forward into the communal space of the cabin. It did not appear as a single ghostly figure, but as a collective of lost souls, their faces etched in eternal anguish. In a voice devoid of human warmth, the apparition intoned, "We are the forgotten. We are the betrayed. You have disturbed our eternal lament." The tone was not merely menacing, but imbued with a sorrow so profound it threatened to engulf every passenger in despair. As the ghostly mass advanced slowly, its form undulated like mist over a midnight graveyard, wrapping its cold, unseen arms around the passengers. In that harrowing moment, every individual aboard was forced to confront the inescapable truth. The airplane was not a conduit to safety, but an instrument of purgatory, a vessel marooned between the realms of the living and the dead. Emerging from the darkness of the cockpit, Anna and Marcus joined the remaining survivors in the cabin. Their faces were etched with terror, yet amid the overwhelming dread, their resolve burned bright. Rallying the frightened passengers, they launched a desperate attempt to challenge the malevolent entity. "We will not let your sorrow bury us," Anna declared, her voice quivering with determination as she clutched the age-worn diary, a tangible link to the past that might hold the key to breaking the cycle. In that defiant moment, a fragile spark of hope took root. Hand in hand, the survivors recited passages from the diary, each word imbued with the memory of lives lost and the desperate prayers for deliverance. The very air vibrated with their united will, as though the souls of the damned were now forced to confront the possibility of absolution. The ensuing battle was not one of physical might, but of indomitable resilience against a tide of inexorable grief. The wounded spirit retaliated by unleashing waves of paralyzing terror. Voices chanted in long-forgotten languages, and shadows reached hungrily from every corner, smothering hope as relentlessly as a funeral shroud. Yet, with every recited verse and every passionate plea for mercy, the grip of the supernatural began to waver. The plane's trembling structure, suspended between mortality and the beyond, seemed to exhale a deep, mournful sigh, a release as comforting as it was sorrowful. As the aircraft neared a small, rain-soaked airstrip, the fury of the storm began to subside. The overwhelming presence of spectral shadows receded, leaving behind only the residue of sorrow and a profound, quiet reflection. In a final, resonant whisper, the apparition intoned, "Remember us, but do not be bound by us." Then, as abruptly as it had emerged, the oppressive force dissolved into the fabric of the night, leaving behind an eerie silence that weighed heavily on every survivor. Outside, the passing storm served as a ghostly reminder of the battle fought within the aircraft's narrow corridors. Flickering runway lights offered a tenuous gateway back to normalcy, a chance for the survivors to reclaim their lives from the grip of an otherworldly terror. In the immediate aftermath, as emergency crews swarmed the plane, the exhausted survivors huddled together in quiet disbelief. Marcus, his pen still trembling in his notebook, recorded the final testament of that nightmare with a raw, unflinching clarity born of unspeakable experience. Anna, clinging to the diary as if it were a lifeline, vowed that the tragic tale of Flight 237 would stand as both a near warning and a solemn memorial, a record of the souls lost in the spectral vortex between life and death. And Elena, tears streaming silently down her face, softly repeated the words that had bound their hopes together. "We will not let them be forgotten." In the days that followed, the night's ordeal spread like a hushed legend. Although authorities unearthed no evidence to substantiate the fantastical accounts, and flight records depicted only a standard journey with modern instruments offering mundane explanations, the survivors knew the truth was indelible, permanently etched into their souls by a night-defying human logic. The dark legacy of Flight 237 lingered like an ever-present shadow, a spectral reminder that some journeys carry far more than just passengers and cargo. They bear the burden of unresolved spirits, forever trapped between the realms of hope and despair. Years passed, and the tale of Flight 237 continued to circulate in hushed tones among aviation enthusiasts and paranormal investigators alike. Marcus eventually published his account as a raw chronicle of terror, loss, and the unyielding struggle against forces beyond mortal comprehension. Anna dedicated herself to uncovering the truths behind historical tragedies in aviation, delving into fragile archives and diaries recounting condemned flights and ghostly apparitions. Elena, once a wide-eyed student full of dreams, evolved into a dedicated researcher of the paranormal, tirelessly piecing together the unexplained threads woven into the fabric of reality. Yet, despite the passage of time, those who had witnessed that fateful flight could never completely shake the lingering chill. In the dead of night, when the skies cleared and the stars shone with an unfeeling cold light, each survivor would pause, momentarily hearing faint echoes of voices from beyond, a constant reminder that somewhere in the vast expanse above, a haunted aircraft sailed an eternal, forsaken route between life and death. The plaintive refrain, "Remember us, but do not be bound by us," persisted as both a somber warning and a bittersweet farewell. The story endures as a chilling narrative etched into the annals of aviation lore, a powerful reminder that even amidst modern technology and precision, mysteries persist that defy explanation. Beyond the ordinary lie realms where spectral presences and temporal reality mingle in a tragic, endless dance, waiting patiently for the next victim, the next flight, and the next tale to be written into the endless night.